Happy Friday, everyone. So thankful to be here. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. Just a quick intro. My name is Danny Passwong. I'm the Senior Director of IT over here at Chula Vista Elementary School District. I've been here almost about 3 years now, and in my spare time, I love cooking, teaching my daughters Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and as well as playing Monopoly and Uno with my family. Joining me on the panel today is John Patton. He's been 30 years of experience in California, public K-12 education. John has worked in multiple school districts and has worked in leadership roles in technology and supporting students and staff. John is a superhero and is currently serving as the coordinator of education and IT for Del Mar Union Schools. Next is Dr. Barbara This, as she is the terrific training supervisor at the SDCLE, San Diego County Office of Education. She's been there for 14 years and works primarily with PeopleSoft software, developing guides, job aids, webinars, and delivering regular communications to clients. She currently serves as the San Diego Imperial County section president, where she continues to find ways to provide training and development opportunities for K-12 employees for fun. Barb enjoys reading and working on home improvement projects. So you can hit her up later on if you need any home improvement tips. Just some, the next slide here, just some key points. Key points are project management phases, design and communications, and effective email communications. And just some extra key points to think about. When stakeholder engagement is done effectively, it improves communication channels between parties, creates and maintains support for the project, gathers information for the organization, reduces the potential for conflict or other project crippling issues, and enhances the reputation of your department, organization, and ultimately the project. The last 2 points very hits home for us over here at Chula Vista as well. People who assist and help in planning the battle rarely battle the plan. The goal is to build not just trust, but transparency, clarity, buy-in, and participation as well. And before we get started, just wanted to show a quick video and to ask everyone here in the to put in your thoughts and about the type of communication that's portrayed in this video. Any observations about the video? You can put that in the chat, that'd be great. Extraordinary customer service. Thanks, Nathan. Patty, hilarious. Yes. Good for you. Find these gems. Yes, the ID10T. That's a famous one right there. Absolutely. Thanks, Jose, for not sounding like that to fix the video audio problem there. Being just observant on the time here, I just wanted to hit over. John, we're gonna just hand this off to you, John. 1 second here. And I need to share the screen.
So as we get that screen to pop up here, in the chat box, go ahead and put in some of your best practices in terms of communication. Hopefully, they're not going to be what you just watched. But what are some things that you find effective when communicating with your stakeholders on projects? We're going to start off with getting some feedback from you guys. Meet the stakeholders where they are, being patient. One-to-one conversations and following up with email, listening, that's a big part of communication. Asking clarifying questions. Yep, not getting too technical. You don't want to speak over people's heads. Start the conversation early on before the project starts. And I think that's where I'm going to move on to the next slide, Danny. It's a good transition there. So communication is key to every phase in project management. So it's important in the initiation, in the planning, in the execution, and also in the closure. And the project charter is one area where you might think, or the project charter is one area where you might think communication, it's not related to communication, but actually the project charter is actually the blueprint for your communication plan. Next slide, please. So designing communication, we heard yesterday in presentations that you need to think about who needs the information about the project. You need to think about what information will be communicated. You need to think about how information will be communicated, when it will be distributed, who is responsible for communicating the project information, and you need to have an escalation process for resolving any communication based on conflicts or issues. And next slide, Danny. If you think back to the project charter that we learned about, that we shared yesterday, the project charter actually consists of all those components. So in the past, before we were using, say, for example, the project charter, the example that the county has put together, you might have other ways of tracking your projects. So, and a lot of times they're not the best ways. So multiple documents scattered through your folders, email messages buried in the inbox and in your sent items folder, notes scribbled on legal pads developed during face-to-face meetings or calls. And I was trying to think of some other things that reminded me of the project management charter template that we have in the EPO toolkit. And I had to go back a little bit in my thinking. And if some of you are around in the mid 2000s, you might remember something called the Enhancing Education Technology Grant, the EETT grants that were out back then that the state had put out. And those grants were brutal. They were very long, essentially reports that you had to create in order to be put into the competitive process for being awarded funding. And a lot of the information that was in those grants, those grants that you submitted, consisted of a lot of the information that was in the project charter template. Some of the things that were missing may have been related to training for staff and so forth. They were a little bit more in depth in there. And the thing about those particular grants is that they were brutal in their length. And what the county has done with their project charter, they have essentially simplified the process. But the charter also serves the purpose of being your blueprint for how you communicate with your stakeholders. Another example that you might think of that comes to mind is related to project charters are RFPs, requests for proposals. So for example, in most cases, your RFP would come after your charter, but in some instances I know in the past, like with E-rate, you're replaying, say, access points, Wi-Fi access points or switches. A lot of those types of projects don't require, you would think, too many stakeholders. The things that happen behind the scene. But you need to remember that those things have an effect on all your stakeholders. So anytime, obviously, you're doing something on the network, you affect every user. So an RFP consists of some of those kinds of components. And next slide. So the power of example. One thing before we get into the blueprint for communication, which is your project charter, is the idea of this repository, and it was shared multiple times. The idea that you have one central location, whether it's a OneDrive or a Google Drive, where the stakeholders and the folks on your team involved with the project store all their documents. And the county has in their EPMO toolkit divided up this particular shared drive into multiple folders, and it's very organized, and you can get back in to find communications that were previously sent and documents that were previously shared. So having a central location, a repository for all your communications is essential when developing a project or deploying a project. Next slide. So in Del Mar, after taking the academy, we talked about what things we could pull out of the academy initially and use right off the bat. And we had decided that two of the templates that would really facilitate some of the projects that we actually already had going were the project charter and the project follow-up. So the project charter, like I was mentioning, really does a great job of becoming that blueprint for your communication plan. So you've got your project name, but there in the second section is your project organization. And in there you have all the people that you're going to be communicating with during this project. So you're spending some time, some dedicated time, figuring out who your steering committee is, who your sponsor is, who your project team is going to be, the stakeholders, and then everybody else that's involved. So one thing that you want to make sure you remember is that not only are the people in your district stakeholders in the project, but your vendors that you're working with are also stakeholders, and they're participating in the project just as much as you are deploying that particular project. So this particular example, we're doing a teacher laptop refresh, and our others involved included Apple Computer, a white glove service, zones, the school sites, and also our maintenance and facilities team, because they need to be on board for obvious reasons when things are shipped and delivered to sites. They need to understand what's going on, be involved in the timeline, and be kept up to date in terms of the communications that comes out of that particular project. One thing I'll mention too, which is kind of a communication tip that we discussed during the academy, is the idea that when you go out to with an RFP, let's say after you've developed your project charter, is that you include sections on that RFP requiring that your vendors participate in your project management process. So they're actually involved participants in your project management. In addition, a lot of the big ones, such as Apple or network companies, they have their own internal project management, and you want to make sure that you're included in any of that project management on their end, because that's going to facilitate clearer communication to your stakeholders as you go through your project. Next slide. So the project description, the project details, that becomes your initial information for your kickoff meetings, for your communication there. And your deliverables, those are the things that are initially being shared with all your stakeholders involved. Next slide. Your project schedules and milestones that you'll list out, these will change. Nothing is stuck in stone or concrete, and you will add to these as we did in our schedule and milestones. These schedules become kind of anchors to the types of communication that you send out and who will be involved in that communication. So not all stakeholders need to receive all communications because you don't want to, fill people's inboxes in with unnecessary information that doesn't relate to them. So not all information in your project is going to relate to all stakeholders, but certainly things like delivery dates, checking out equipment to teachers, those kinds of things. You want to make sure that you've got clear communications, and that information is going to be outlined when you begin thinking about your project schedules and milestones.
Hey, John, we're going to need to, because of time, we're going to need to start Barb right now.
Okay.
I'm sorry, John. Barb?
Okay. As Danny said in the beginning, I work with the PeopleSoft support team, and I've worked on a lot of projects. And one of my roles is communicating out throughout the project to our stakeholders and keeping them up to date with what's going on. So what I wanted to do today was look at one of the emails that I put together and talk about just kind of planning when you do your email communication. So we all get tons of emails, and some of them we read, some of them we don't. And it seems as soon as you do one email communication, another one pops in. So my first question for you today, what do you like in an email communication? If you could drop that in the chat, that would be great. What do you like about an email communication? If you even like email communication, they're concise. There you go. Schedule. Okay. Get to the point. Short and to the point, purpose in the first sentence, easy to understand. Short and sweet, but enough details to handle their quest. Subject line. Keep a record of what was and wasn't communicated. Yeah, great. Bullet points. Very good. Oh, okay. This one may be an easier question. What don't you like about email communications? Long paragraphs. There you go. People don't always read or reply. The reply all. Good point. Trying to find it again can get disorganized. Slow response, a lot of spam and tons of emails. Yeah, so there's a lot, we can find a lot more things wrong with emails than we can find right with emails. So my goal is to be able to create communication around these projects that people are actually going to read. It's very frustrating when you go to roll out a project and somebody says, oh, I didn't know it was going live. And it's like, okay, you've had 4 emails come out in the last month and you didn't know it was going live. So I'm going to share one of the emails that I did. So you do the next slide. Okay, here's a basic email that has lots of stuff in it. So it's got long paragraphs. Subject line is just training. My attachment just says training, and you're going training for what? You know, you've got a lot of stuff going at you at the district. And if you're receiving something from me that maybe you haven't received before, you've got a new audience. They're not quite sure what to do. So I took this email, and then go to the next slide, please. And I can make your long emails even easier to read. So this is a brief overview of what I started to do with this email. And I'm going to go into detail in here in just a minute. Go to your next slide. So before I cleaned up my email, I wanted to make sure I knew who my audience was, because that's really important. Is this going to CTOs or site secretaries? Because you know, CTOs, their time is limited. Give me what I need, very basic, and away I go. Your site secretary, you may have to write out every step of everything they're going to need to do and put the help desk number in bold letters because you know they're going to have problems. Also finding out what the purpose of this email is about. And those came up in the chat. You want an email that you know the purpose. So take those things into account. So now I want to break down how I cleaned up this email. So next slide. So starting at the top, we talked about a subject line. This one was welcome to the PeopleSoft family. So we know it's something about PeopleSoft, it's about finance. I took the attachment, instead of it just saying training, I made it training calendar and list of courses. So our users know exactly what that attachment's about. When they download it, they go to save it. They don't have to put any other naming convention on it. They got what they need. And then this starts with the body of the email. I go back to my days in high school where you're learning to write a letter in your English class. You always start with a greeting of some time. So it depends on what this is. I have some general announcements that just go out to everybody, so it may not have a greeting. this was for a specific group of people, and so I added a greeting to my email. Next slide. Then this is the top part of that email. Have you ever heard of BLUF? It's bottom line up front. And somebody in the chat had said, give me a purpose. Let me know what I'm going to read about. So I really try in that first sentence to let people know what this email is about. So this one is, we know the change is never easy and hope to make your transition to PeopleSoft Finance on July 1st as seamless as possible. So now they know, hey, I'm involved in PeopleSoft Finance. July 1st is my deadline. So if I got this on June 1st, I went, okay, I'll go back and look at it. I got this on June 30th. I'm going like, oh my gosh, we're making a change. What do? I better read this. So having that bottom line up front is important. In that bottom section, in the original email, there were multiple fonts. And it gets kind of confusing when you're running the different fonts. So I try to use stick with one font and use bold and italics with that one font or underline. Second font if absolutely necessary. Next slide. Okay, here I broke out, somebody had mentioned bullets. So I took that long sentence that listed different modules and I put it under bullets. Very easy to read. Images. I like to use this with my different projects to call attention to the emails so that when this comes out, that little icon, the first time it comes out, they saw it, ooh, that's training, kind of sticks in their head. I have one that I use like for system maintenance that comes out. So when people see my regular emails, they know, oh, this is maintenance. I know I need to look at this email rather than having to read through and figure out what's going on. And that, back up one, Danny, for just a second. The other piece is that table at the bottom. Originally, it was just data, table-like, but didn't have the grid. And it was important that Linus and Charlie and Lucy knew which classes they were taking. So I put the lines under the table so they could line up with what they were doing. So that was important too. Next slide. And here as I continued through that email, I had some other icons in here. I got a technology check. I've got my training. And then the last one was the support icon. So they could easily run through that email and know what they were looking at. Next slide. And then as you wrap up your email, do a closing statement in your email. We look forward to working with you. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. Usually in that last sentence, I'll put who they need to contact because somebody always has questions around an email. You know, this needs to go to somebody else. I'm not available on that day. Tell me what I need to do, but kind of wrap it up in that last sentence. And then make sure you include your information. I can't tell you how many times I get an email from somebody that says, hey, contact me if you've got any questions. I've got no name. I got no phone number. I've got an email address, and hopefully I can figure out what that email address is. So make sure you have have your contact information in there as well. And then spell check. Sounds pretty obvious, but we're in education. We learn to spell in elementary school. So we need to make sure our spelling is correct in the communications we put out. This isn't a text message that's going to friends. So we want to make sure it's as accurate as possible. And it happens. You know, we miss something because we know those funny different here's and there's that the spelling can be slightly different. You know, that's okay. But try and get it as concise as possible. Okay, next slide, Danny. All right, so here is my formatted email. They can look through it very quickly. You can see the training part. I can see my table. I got my attachment. And next slide. And then when I wrapped it up, here it is that the different sections on tech support, training, and support, and then my closing statement and my contact information at the bottom. And next slide. So what other things can you think of that could go in an email that would make it easier to read or be something that you'd want to read? What other tips and tricks do you have around emails? And while you're typing your answers in the chat, somebody had asked about this presentation. If you go back to Sched and on our day, click on it, go down about 3/4 of the way down, there's a link to this PowerPoint. So yes, it is available. So any other tips? A schedule? Okay, so possibly here we got training going on. I had a little bit in that table, but maybe I needed to have a little more information around the training that was going to happen or where the project is in the life of the project. So, you've got your project plan with your milestones. You could include those in an email as well and just let people know, where you're at on the project. Maybe you highlight, okay, we're on testing right now. And then you go through and you go down to maybe you're developing training materials or wherever you're at. So people can follow what's going on. Inserting links is good. I didn't in this one. I do it a lot. But test your links before you send an email. Make sure, if you know your audience, if it's going to somebody in your district, chances are where you've put those links, they have access to. I have found I have to email to people outside of my county office. I email out to the districts. So I have to have a place to save my attachments that everybody can get at them. So make sure that those links work for somebody else and maybe send your email out once and have somebody test the link. So ensure that. Anything else? Okay, there's one. I split all of my technical emails with, I start all of my technical emails with for the technically inclined, and ending the section providing that most of the basic core details are in the first paragraph. So there you go. Good point, because like I said, you've got some people, you get an email and it's like, I know this stuff, just give me the short and sweet. So you could do that. You could do short and sweet in the beginning and for additional details. A lot of times I will do that with those links. For detailed steps, click on this link. So, okay, and here's one. Email should have where practical, who, what, why, and when. 97% of the emails I receive are missing at least 2 of those things. Good point. You want to make sure you answer the questions, because when I email out, I can email out to 500 people. And I really don't want everybody responding back to that email because I missed something. So it's important that you have all your information in your email that's going out. Good to add project abbreviation at the beginning of the subject line for easy filtering. Good point. All right, if you don't have any other questions, Danny, it's back to you.
Just we have just a little bit of time left. Any questions for the panel? And just if you can see here, this is how you can contact us. Should you have any questions for us? Actually, I should copy and paste this in there as well. Any questions? Please put in the chat. That went way too big, huh?
The other thing is always find yourself a good editor. If you're not good at editing, find somebody that is. I've gotten to where I've gotten pretty good at it. But if you've got I've got stuff that goes out to assistant superintendents and superintendents, so I always have somebody else check my emails before they go out. I'll pass it back to John so he can finish up.
John, we have a little bit of time. You want to finish up the last couple slides?
I was just going to mention the other thing that we kind of took hold of from the toolkit was that status report. Like others, though, we didn't do a weekly status report. We did a bi-weekly status report, and that status report obviously doesn't go to all stakeholders. A lot of times it might just go to your sponsor. Your sponsor, in our case, it was our assistant superintendent of business, Chris Delahante, and it gives him an opportunity then to update cabinet on project status that is happening in district. So that's one document that we found very useful. It's short, succinct, and doesn't take a lot of time to complete. And it can also be enhanced with any kind of vendor project information that comes out at that current time too. So another very valuable tool in that toolkit that the county has provided on the Project Management Academy.
Somebody mentioned in the chat about using non-technical terms if we're communicating with non-technical people, and that's very true.
Yeah, and that communication, a lot of times you think you have all your stakeholders, but every school's a little different in terms of how they communicate and where that communication funnels through. And as a department, we have to make sure that we understand that chain of communication. So a lot of our schools, when teachers have questions, the first place they're going to run is up to their front office, and they're going to ask their admin assistants. So in a teacher laptop refresh, the admin assistants aren't getting new laptops, but they need to be cued in on what we're telling teachers so that when those questions, that teachers have come up, they know where they can go to get answers if they can't reach us. So the first place they usually go is their front offices. So you always want to kind of, those indirect stakeholders, they may not actually be direct recipients of what's occurring, but they still need to be in the know in terms of process, timelines, and so forth.
Gabriel mentioned in the chat about using buzzwords. From tech people, we know what they're talking about. Lay people don't. And the other thing that's also a problem are acronyms. Make sure if you're going to use an acronym at the beginning of the first time you use it, spell it out what it is so we know what it is going through, because not everybody knows. And man, I bet you we could write an entire email around acronyms because we've got so many.
Barb and John, just a question. What are your recommendations in terms of sending weekly status reports? Do you recommend putting it in a PDF or just putting in a body of an email? Barb?
I would say PDF.
And I would go for an email. So a PDF, as long as the PDFs are stored in your central repository, you can access that information. A lot of times we'll do both. We'll send an email, and how are they going to get the email? I mean, how are they going to get the PDF, right? They're going to get it in an email. So, both of them are kind of a record of communication and can be accessed later. So.
Yeah. And here's another thing you can also do. The reason I say is a PDF is you could put in the body of your email quick synopsis. Project is on track. We've completed this phase. Status reports, if you want the details, are attached. That because not everybody wants to know the nitty gritty. And the other thing I find sometimes is the formatting. When you send an email, the formatting sometimes changes. So you may run into a problem when you're doing your status reports. So you want to check that.
Very good points. So no recommendations for a website to have all the analytics and progress bars? Nothing like that, huh?
We haven't got to that point.
I have to explain these on my calendar file. Yeah, admin assistants. Yeah.
Yep.
We have just a few more minutes. Any other closing questions for the panel? Respectful of the time here. How do you feel about using Monday.com to communicate? I have only used it just a little bit. I do think it's pretty effective. But Barb, John, you guys have any experience with communicating with Monday?
I've used Monday.com. It depends on who is on the Monday.com board. Because it was mentioned earlier, you only have so many licenses with Monday.com, and it doesn't always communicate out well, or they can't get back to the project board. We've got limited licenses, and we have people on projects outside of those licenses, so they can't get back to the board. So sometimes I do both, depending on how many people are involved in the communication. If it's just the people on the board, then yeah, I use Monday.com.
Yeah, and I have no experience with Monday.com, but I like what Kirby shared this morning. It seemed like it was very useful for him. Traditionally, we've used Google Drive, shared drives, and then Google Sites or PDFs, like Barbara was saying. So.
Yeah, I also serve as the Monday.com champion. When we rolled it out, we had somebody in each department that helped support the rollout. And one of the things that I liked is it does notifications. So you have a flat email or Excel spreadsheet. It's not letting people know they've got a deadline coming. Monday.com, you can set it up with rules that it will remind people a week ahead of time. They can go look at my work and see what they've got coming up. So I like that communication piece coming out of Monday.com as well.
Barb, how much training did it take to get started with Monday.com?
We did a couple hour sessions. Our champions went through it with Monday.com. They talked us through the steps. We did some work on our own. We broke it into small groups to get them involved and took it kind of in stages. And then, like I said, our champions work with the departments because not everybody, I work with the technical support team that works on just tickets coming in. They don't really use Monday.com, so they don't have a lot of use for it. The managers do. So then those are the people that we try and do quarterly meetings, just a training session to kind of give them the latest and greatest.
Awesome. Well, I think we're short on time here. Just a couple of last things. In the PowerPoint that John put together, there is a really good paradigm of the Chromebook refresh. And John kind of put it down in terms of accomplishments, in progress, and next steps. So when you get a chance, take a look at that. I think we did show the slide with our contact information, and it's also in the chat room. Other than that, take care of yourself, be well, have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you at some of the other workshops, all right?
Thanks, everybody, for attending.
You guys, Danny, don't forget to have people go to the lunch events that are happening now.
Thank you for reminding me. Thank
Yeah.
you for reminding me. Del Mar is always on top of it. Yes, please go to the lunch workshops. There's a few there. When you go to the website, do the expanded view, and you'll see all the other workshops as well. I think there's 3 today. Correct. All righty, folks. Enjoy your lunches from Uber Eats.